everyone, Hobbyist here, back again with another video, and this time we are going to be going straight into the characters and the abilities and how they're going to affect your gameplay. These are the rank 1 characters that exist inside of Citadels. We have the Assassin, the Witch, and the Magistrate. Before I go into the specific abilities in regards to what they do and how they interact with other characters, the one thing that I always gotta keep in mind, and just as a general theme of the rank 1 characters, is obviously during the roll call during Citadels, if you remember back in my tutorial, they're always going to go first. There's no one that's going to go before them. So sometimes it's good to pick any of these characters simply for the fact that you get to be the first one to kind of do your first thing before anybody else decides to use their abilities against you. So that's really important. But otherwise, let us go ahead and start with the first character. So the first character that we're going to cover inside of Citadels is the good old classic Assassin. Assassin's pretty much been the beginner character since day one, ever since Citadels is originally created. But in order to understand the Assassin, especially for your beginning first game, here is her ability. Whenever the Assassin is called and you reveal your card to show that you picked the Assassin, you have the ability to call a character that you wish to kill. Then the killed character skips their turn. So the interesting thing about the Assassin, especially when it comes to as far as going for kills and kind of clarifying on that ability, you can't specifically target a certain individual. So if you're playing with your best friend Joe and you have the Assassin and you want to take out Joe, you can't say, I'm going to assassinate Joe's character. No. You have to be able to successfully guess what character Joe picked in order to take their turn. So you gotta be like, as the Assassin, I am going to assassinate the Merchant. And just hope that that was the character that Joe picked. The important thing with the Assassin when it comes to interacting with any of the other characters inside of Citadels is the fact that generally you have to play if your character gets called. But if your character was the one that got assassinated, you're supposed to keep a straight poker face and pretty much act like your character's not in play. So if Joe's Merchant got assassinated and we got to the Merchant, he doesn't go, oh well, I guess I got assassinated, my turn is skipped. He just knows that in his brain that his turn got skipped. You're basically bluffing for the Assassin to make the Assassin think, did I actually kill the character that I wanted to kill? Or was the character not even in the game in the first place and it was just a wasted kill? So, that's pretty much all that there is to the Assassin. If you decide that you don't want to play with the Assassin, or if you're an experienced Citadels player who's played with the Assassin so many times that you're kind of bored and want to try out new things, the Witch is the next character that you can switch out the Assassin for to take that number 1 spot. But the Witch is definitely more complicated when it comes to how her abilities work and interact, but I'm going to break it down in just a little bit. So basically, when the Witch gets called and you reveal your Witch card, she basically does her gather resources action of either taking 2 gold or selecting one of the 2 cards that she draws. After that, she calls a character that she wishes to bewitch, then puts your turn on hold. After the bewitched character gather resources, resume your turn as that character. So the key thing that makes it interesting with the Witch and basically breaking it down is you essentially take over the abilities of whatever character that you choose to bewitch. So for example, if you're gathering resources or your current city has a lot of noble districts, for example, and you decide that you want to bewitch the king, the thing is that your turn will immediately stop for 2 rounds because you'll have your rank 2 characters and your rank 3 characters who will be going after you. So that's kind of one loophole that's inside of her strategy, is that she has to wait quite a while depending on the rank character that she picked in order to use their ability. But let's say that we got to the king's turn, right? The king flips over their card and takes the crown, decides to get their cards, but then their turn immediately stops. At that point moving forward, the Witch would then have the ability to use the king's ability of taking gold for every noble district that the witch has, as if the witch selected the king, if that makes sense. So you aren't necessarily the character in taking everything of their abilities, you just take whatever abilities that benefits you the most during your turn. So she's got a lot of strategy on her end and is definitely more strategically complex in comparison. The key thing with her, and especially with the assassin from earlier, is that whatever character that the witch bewitches, the rank 2 characters, specifically the thief, cannot interact and steal from the bewitched character or from the assassinated character. So that's something to keep in mind, just as a sort of reference. So if you're looking for that step up, the witch is definitely that step up, as she does her whole thing. The last alternate character that you can choose, if you decide that you don't want to play with the assassin, because the assassin is too classic and boring, but you also think that the witch's bewitching ability is a bit too complicated to kind of wrap your brain around, then we also have the Magistrate, who is a rank 1 character. And the Magistrate's ability simply is such. He gets to assign his warrants face down right beside any 3 character tokens. He gets to reveal the signed warrant to confiscate the first district that player built. Then the player gets back all the gold that they paid to build that district. So basically, the Magistrate is more so a form of bluffing as a character, because these 3 tokens that you see in front of you here, of these 3, this one here in the middle is the signed one. When they're face down, they'll look like this. So you honestly have a bluffing ability / gamble for the other characters, because you don't know what it is that they picked. But the great thing about it is that if you play it right, especially if you get those who are doing really good, you can kind of piggyback off the characters who are doing really well. So if you get a merchant who has a high district in their trade and is able to acquire a lot of gold and is going for a big play in order to build something big, if you manage to put a signed warrant on the merchant, then you know for sure that if that merchant decides to build that very expensive district card, that you have the ability to immediately confiscate it and play that card for free. So it's incredibly powerful. Now granted, the other key thing to note about the warrants for the Magistrate is that the Magistrate has the option of revealing what their warrants are. Sometimes you might put a signed warrant on somebody, but then realize that they're too broke. Like the thief or somebody of the rank 2 characters did something to any of the more rich players to where their gold got stolen or something like that, to where you might change your mind of stealing a district because they don't have anything to build. In that case, you don't have to reveal anything at all, and you can kind of just bluff it as just this sort of looming threat that's over that character. It's a very interesting kind of play as the Magistrate. Key thing about the Magistrate is that if the Magistrate has that district card, so for example, if the Magistrate has a tavern and somebody else decides to build a tavern, the Magistrate can't confiscate an identical city, as it's the same thing as having 2 taverns in your hand. You can't play both of them. So that's something else that's very considered that you have to keep in mind. The confiscated cities that the Magistrate takes never even get played into that person's city. It will just immediately be played into the Magistrate's city. So there's a little bit of strategy and way less confusion in comparison to the Witch, I would think. Because it's a matter of, can I get to this person? Can I convince that person to build and maybe bluff them to either build something that I will take for myself, or scare them to the point to where they won't build anything at all? So that essentially covers all of the rank 1 characters inside of Citadels. I hope all of this information was really helpful to you, and I'll see you guys for the rank 2 characters.